Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 72 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to break down the AFC North. So we have some buys, sells, sleepers, and breakouts for the division. We'll discuss all four teams, their depth charts, all the fantasy relevant players for this upcoming season, and get into their dynasty value and trade value as well. So before we do that, as always, make sure we're following this podcast on your platform of choice. We are on everything out there, whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go make sure you are following this show so you don't miss any future episodes. And go find us on social media. So we're on Twitter, at Dynasty War Room. Happy to interact, follow back there. We're on Facebook and YouTube, like I mentioned, same handle as Twitter, at Dynasty War Room. So go follow along there, subscribe, and check out all the content. And let's move on into today's show. So one quick message before we do that, though, as always, Fast Draft, new fantasy best ball app. It's awesome. Go check it out. You can download it for free from the App Store and use code WARROOM when you sign up. And you'll get a deposit match, 100% deposit match up to $50 that you can use on all sorts of best ball contests. So again, code WARROOM on Fast Draft, and you can jump into some really quick fast drafts, I guess you could say, before the season starts. So it works just like Underdog or DraftKings or any of those other apps that you maybe have seen or used before. But Fast Draft, I think, is a little bit quicker. It's a very smooth interface. And highly recommend you go check it out and use my code WARROOM again for up to $50 deposit match when you sign up and use my code today. All right, so Baltimore Ravens, first team in the division. We're going to go in alphabetical order as we usually do. We will finish off the show with our buy, sell, sleeper, and breakout for the division as a whole, although we will discuss players' values throughout the show as we go through each team. We'll also do some division predictions at the end as well. This division, in my opinion, is one of the more straightforward of, the various divisions. I just think that there's not a lot of guessing that's going to have to get done in terms of how this division is going to shake out. And so we'll start with the favorites, the Baltimore Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson at quarterback. He is now backed up by Cooper Rush. So new acquisition there coming over from Dallas. Lamar Jackson, the QB3, number 4 overall player on keep trade cut right now for dynasty value. And in the backfield, Derrick Henry, who's RB16 and player 67 overall, with Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell behind him. Rashina Lee as well, buried there on the depth chart. But Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, the two primary backups, both more receiving speed backs compared to Derrick Henry, who of course is going to be the grinder, the power back. He's going to be on the field the vast majority of the time. But Justice Hill at RB82, Keaton Mitchell at RB72, I would flip those. I prefer Justice Hill, especially for immediate impact in 2025. Justice Hill was the backup last year. He caught a lot of passes out of the backfield. He was the 2-minute guy. I fully expect him to be in that role again, and I'm not sure that Keaton Mitchell is going to be anything more than a change of pace, break glass in case of emergency for injury purposes type of guy. He suffered his own injuries already in his young career. Definitely has some speed, shifty guy. Would be intriguing from a fantasy perspective if he can get on the field and stay healthy. But from a practicality standpoint, I just don't know that he's going to get the playing time. And if you're Baltimore, why waste your time giving too many people other than Derrick Henry the ball? Especially when Justice Hill, for those times when you do give somebody else the ball, he showed last year he's a perfectly fine 2-minute back. He can catch the ball, third down, pass block, all that kind of thing. So I think there's really not a whole lot of room elsewhere for fantasy value, but important to know who's there. At the wide receiver position, Zay Flowers, checking in at wide receiver 28 and the 82nd player overall on keep trade cut. Rashad Bateman at wide receiver 62 and 182 overall. And he's joined by DeAndre Hopkins, who is wide receiver 112. Devontae Walker at wide receiver 124 is also there. And at tight end, Mark Andrews, tight end 13, 117 overall. And then Isaiah Likely, tight end 11 and player 111 overall. So we went in on the running backs a bit, but let's talk about the three other positions here. And let's go back up to quarterback, where Lamar Jackson, the clear QB3, I think, in Dynasty. Cooper Rush, if you want to toss him on your bench as a, handcuff break, again, another one of those, you could start him if Lamar Jackson gets hurt. But Lamar Jackson is a stud. He's going to be around a while. I think that he's a player you don't really have to overthink. If you have him on your team, you're going to keep him. You're going to start him every single week. He's awesome. I think the real decision-making for Lamar Jackson really comes down to people doing startup drafts right now in terms of where you take him, because I think whether you take him at 3, 4, 5, etc., is really where the interesting question is. I personally, I think he'd be my number 4 player off the board, so I would agree with the keep, trade, cut analysis of where he is. I would take Jamar Chase over him. I would take Jaden Daniels. I would take Josh Allen over him as well. But just one of those guys that can carry your team on any given week, and nothing to worry about with him. At the wide receiver position, though, I think Zay Flowers is someone that I like. I liked him probably a little bit more last year, but he's turned out to be, through his first couple seasons in the league, a very consistent, solid PPR type of player. If you're in a half-point PPR or a standard scoring league, he's probably not the receiver that you're going to want. But in full PPR leagues, like most Dynasty leagues are, Zay Flowers, I think, is a very solid, capable player, whether it's as a flex or wide receiver 2 or 3. I think ideally you'd like to have a couple better options. If you're a contender, he's probably more your wide receiver 3 or 4 in those types of scenarios. But I think you feel good if he's a wide receiver 4 for your team and he's your third receiver, your one of your first 2 flexes, that kind of thing. Really good player for that mold. And Rashad Bateman, I think, is also a guy that I am very much intrigued by. He's finally taken those steps. He had a nice year last year. And, being a former first-round pick, the expectations were high. Clearly did not, reach the ceiling that people were hoping for. But still showing that he, is a talented enough player. Certainly is a good deep ball target. And so for his price tag at wide receiver 62, I think he's a very solid player because I think you can flex him. If you're in a shallower league, probably not. But if you're in a start 10, start 11 league, like most Dynasty leagues again are, he's someone that you can absolutely throw in as a flex and, hope for a long touchdown. See if he can take another step into being more than just that deep ball guy. And, if he can cut into some of Zay Flowers' workload a little bit, maybe. I don't know how likely that is, but he at least has some potential, and I like him for his cost. Now, in terms of the other receivers on this roster, DeAndre Hopkins, I think that, his time has come and gone. I think he's going to provide more real-life value for this team than he will fantasy value. I would imagine that he is on the field quite a bit, but I don't know what he has left. It's one of those things where he's just at that age in his 30s where any year could be his last. And so I'm not very interested in him really in any dynasty or redraft format. I think he's just one of those guys that if you have him on a roster, you're just going to ride him out. You're really not going to get anything for a trade. Although maybe you luck out if he has a big week 1, you can trade him right away and try to get something. But you're realistically, I don't think you're getting anything more than like a 4th round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. Devontae Walker, kind of the same situation in terms of value at wide receiver 124, but he at least has the age on his side. But again, 4th round pick from a couple years ago, I just don't know that you're going to get anything out of him. The passing volume in this offense just is not there, especially, and it makes sense, right? You have Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson can run the ball. So to me, this is, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and then the tight end position is where, the targets are going to go. So outside of Flowers and Bateman, I just don't know that there's going to be a lot for you fantasy-wise. Tight end is a very interesting position, though, for this team because Isaiah Likely is ranked ahead of Mark Andrews in dynasty value on Keep Trade Cut. Although Isaiah Likely just sustained an injury, he's going to be out potentially through week 1. I think it's questionable at this point whether or not he's going to play in game 1. It seems like he at a minimum will at least be back by weeks 2 or 3, but he's going to miss training camp. He's going to miss preseason. And, that's going to open the door again for Mark Andrews to solidify his hold on that number one spot. And so I would have their dynasty values flipped. I understand that Andrews is a few years older and that there's a lot of questions about whether or not he returns to Baltimore after this season, and Isaiah Likely should be the guy in the future, but I just don't think you can flip those values yet. I think in 2025, Mark Andrews is going to be the much better fantasy tight end, and I think that's got to put, there's got to be some weight on 2025 here. You can't just look at the future and say, hey, Isaiah Likely is going to be great in 2026. Sure, he very well might be, but the injury this season doesn't help. I think that it's a little bit overblown in terms of how much he was going to take from Andrews this year. We saw last year that, Andrews took a small step back, but outside of that beginning of the season when Isaiah Likely went off for, 30 fantasy points, he didn't do a ton the rest of the year. So I think that this is still Mark Andrews' spot to be, the tight end one in this offense. He's going to be a tight end one in fantasy, in my opinion. I think there's a very real possibility that he could be a top 6 or 7 guy this year. And so for those reasons, I think that's still enough to have Andrews ahead of Likely in Dynasty. And I would be very excited to have Mark Andrews at this point as my starting tight end in Dynasty, especially because if you've acquired him recently, he probably didn't cost you that much. He's not going for a haul like he would have a few seasons ago, but he's young enough that he's going to get a contract somewhere else. This is not a player that is just going to, blow away into the wind the second he leaves Baltimore. If he leaves Baltimore, it's not even a guarantee that happens. And so I think that the value has dropped a bit too soon on Mark Andrews, and so I am excited about him and think he's a worthwhile player to target right now in trades. All right, moving on over to the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow, of course, leading the way, and he's backed up by Jake Browning. Joe Burrow, the QB4 and player 10 overall on Keep Trade Cut. At running back, Chase Brown, running back 11, number 56 overall. He's backed up by Taj Brooks and Samaje Perine. Brooks is the running back 62, 231 overall. Perine, running back 118. And just sneaking into the Keep Trade Cut top 500 at player 460. At wide receiver, Jamar Chase, of course, he's actually listed as not only the wide receiver 1, but the overall number 1 player on Keep Trade Cut right now. He's actually tied value-wise with Josh Allen for that top spot, but interesting nonetheless that he's at the number 1 overall spot and not at 2, 3, 4. He's got T. Higgins opposite of him, wide receiver 17 and 44 overall. Andre Ios, I can't pronounce his name. Iosavas, I think is how to pronounce it, but don't quote me on that. Could be way off. And wide receiver 90, 271 overall for him. Jermaine Burton is there as well at wide receiver 102. And it's an interesting kind of back end of the receiver room, so we'll talk about that here in just a minute. And then Mike Gesicki and Noah Fant at tight end, the newly signed Noah Fant. Gesicki, tight end 31, 215 overall, and Fant, tight end 46 and 289 overall. I would imagine that that's going to rise a bit. It probably hasn't fully caught up from the signing. But I will say I do still prefer Gesicki to Fant. The Bengals just paid Mike Gesicki a lot of money over a multi-year contract. Fant was cut by a tight end needy team in Seattle. So I'm not going to count on Noah Fant for a lot in this offense. I think that there's certainly some upside given the upgrade in quarterback and the offensive scheme overall, but he's going to have to fight for playing time, and Mike Gesicki is also a very good receiving tight end. So, Gesicki is the guy that I would want to own of those two. Quarterback situation, kind of like Lamar Jackson, there's not a lot to say about Joe Burrow. He's a stud. He's going to be awesome. I think you're going to get a little bit more touchdown variation from year to year, obviously, with him because you don't have, he doesn't have the rushing floor that somebody like Lamar has or really any rushing quarterback. And so his overall finish, while was awesome last year and certainly, throughout his career, he's been very good. Passing, your pocket passers are a little bit more up and down in terms of their overall dynasty finishes or fantasy finishes, I should say, on a year-to-year basis. So if you get a little bit of regression in terms of the touchdowns, I don't think you should be concerned about it. I think you should probably plan on that just to know, hey, he's not going to be giving you a whole lot from a rushing standpoint, and so pocket passers, they just fluctuate year to year. So be a little bit wary of that, but still somebody you're going to start every single week, and you're going to feel good about. And I really like the situation here for Chase Brown. So at running back 11, I think that's a very good spot. He's a player that I'm interested in. I think he's a good player to target and that you might be able to acquire this offseason. And he is in line for what I believe will be a true 3-down role as a workhorse. He can catch the ball. He's got good speed. He can score from the goal line. He is a true all-around running back that is going to be in a very, very good offense. And so even if a couple of those passing touchdowns from Burrow go to the running game this year, it's going to be Chase Brown. Taj Brooks, I think, is a really interesting backup. They got rid of Zach Moss recently, so Brooks, I think, is in line to be the solid number 2 running back on this roster, and is certainly worth acquiring if you have Chase Brown on your team. And then Samaje Perine, I think he's more of an afterthought. Might get a couple passing downs, but this is going to be largely Brown and then Brooks sprinkled in terms of the running game. At receiver, Ja'Marr Chase, we just mentioned, number 1 overall player. He's young. He's awesome. He's got Joe Burrow. It's a team with a bad defense. They're going to throw the ball a ton again this year. He's locked and loaded as the wide receiver 1, even if he doesn't finish as the wide receiver 1 of the year in terms of dynasty value, given that he is still, so young and he's got his big extension. He's got another 5-6 years as just being an all-around awesome top 5 wide receiver. So you should feel very good about having him on your roster. T. Higgins, another good. He's a better receiver in terms of points per game. He does miss some time, and he struggled a little bit with injuries in his career. But at wide receiver 17, I think that's a pretty fair price. I was a bit down on him entering last season, but he showed me enough to where I think I'm comfortable with his price for where he's at. He's not someone that I will ever really love simply because he can't be the number 1 in this offense unless, Ja'Marr Chase gets hurt. But still, high-powered offense. They're going to throw the ball a ton, and they're going to have to put up a lot of points this year to win games. So I'm expecting a lot of yards, catches, touchdowns, everything for both Chase and Higgins and Chase Brown. In terms of the depth receivers on this team, I don't think you need to worry about anybody else. Jermaine Burton is a little bit interesting as a former 3rd-round pick, but he didn't do anything as a rookie. There were speculation he could even get cut, off-the-field concerns. It's just not someone that I'm really that interested in. And so really it's just the 2 guys, Chase, Higgins. That's all you got to worry about. And then the tight ends with Gesicki, Fant. I think those guys will provide a little bit more value than any receiver not named Chase or Higgins. And so I don't mind those 2, especially for their cost. Gesicki at tight end 31 is cheap enough. I think he's relatively easy to acquire, especially now with Noah Fant signing. I would imagine it's not going to cost more than a 3rd-round pick to get Mike Gesicki. And so I think that's a worthwhile move. All right, so the Cleveland Browns check in. They're the 3rd team in the division, and they're led by a whole mix of players at quarterback. It's a mess. Joe Flacco is there, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders. Nobody knows who's going to start. Nobody knows the pecking order. They're all probably going to be bad. That's just the honest truth there. I don't think you're going to get much fantasy value from any of them. If I had to guess right now, I think Joe Flacco would be the starter, and he's the QB 44 on Keep Trade Cut. Kenny Pickett at QB 46. Dylan Gabriel, QB 38, and then Shedeur Sanders, QB 33. Interestingly enough, I think that all 4 of these values are probably off. I think Kenny Pickett, there was some speculation at one point in the offseason that he could be the leader in the clubhouse, but I think we've seen enough out of him throughout his career. Dylan Gabriel was drafted in the 3rd round. Shedeur Sanders went in the 5th. Every indication so far through camp is that Gabriel is ahead of Sanders in the depth chart. So I think the Shedeur Sanders hype is getting a little bit overblown at QB 33. I think people are going to be in for a disappointment should they be drafting him or trading for him with the expectation that he's going to be a starter at some point this season. I just don't think that's going to happen. At least certainly not for a while. This is going to be Joe Flacco. He's going to get first opportunity. He's the veteran. He's the proven guy that's done this before, even though he is a million years old. And then I would imagine it's going to be Dylan Gabriel that gets first crack over Shedeur Sanders. So I'm still Gabriel over Sanders at this point, just based on the draft value, third round versus fifth round. And could Shedeur Sanders eventually get a couple starts? Sure. If that happens, it's probably going to be at the very end of the season when things are, all is lost. I'm not expecting anything from Kenny Pickett, who is currently a little bit banged up. But this is going to be Joe Flacco. He's going to get to throw the ball around a bunch. It's going to be a bad team. And, it's good news for Jerry Jeudy and some of the other receivers. But it's a mess at quarterback. They will almost surely be drafting a quarterback in the top 10 next year. And it will tank all value for anyone else, including Gabriel and Sanders from this team. Running back is another very interesting position for the Cleveland Browns because Quinshon Judkins, who they drafted in the early second round, got a domestic violence charge. So he is currently not practicing or playing, and he's not even signed yet. He does not sign his contract with the team. So that also means he can't really be suspended yet because he's not an actual, he's not on a roster. He hasn't been signed. So we're awaiting news essentially to see what's going to play out legally, what's going to play out suspension-wise. I would imagine that he's going to get at least a 2-game suspension, if not 4 or 6, and we'll see how that plays out. But it's obviously going to be a slow start to the season. In redraft, I would be avoiding entirely. I would be 100% out on Quinshon Judkins. In Dynasty, I think his value certainly takes a hit because he's not going to be ready to go necessarily right away, and he's going to get a suspension. And so he checks in at running back 21, 93 overall, which is a big drop from where he was a month or two ago. He's backed up by fellow rookie Dylan Sampson, who is RB 37 and 153 overall. Jerome Ford is there as well, RB 64 and 237 overall. So before we move on and talk about receivers and tight ends, Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford, I think, are very interesting players, both in redraft and in Dynasty. Jerome Ford probably more so in redraft, but Dylan Sampson is someone that the team took in the 4th round, certainly could become the starting running back on day 1 if Judkins is not there. Jerome Ford probably going to be more the passing down guy, 3rd down, 2-minute drill, but he's got experience. We've seen him be an all right running back in the past. The team could easily trot Jerome Ford out as the starter in week 1. So the price tag for both guys is relatively low, especially for Ford. You can get him really, really cheap right now in Dynasty if you are really thin at running back, or if you have Judkins and you were counting on starting him. Jerome Ford could be a very cheap replacement option. You could probably get him for, a 3rd, definitely, and a 4th, probably. I just don't think teams are going to be holding on to him for some huge draft, price. But if you want to be more on the safe side, I think a 3rd round pick would probably get it done for Jerome Ford. And even for Dylan Sampson, I think at this point, his value has gone up a little bit from where he was when he got drafted. I'd be hesitant to give up a 2nd round pick for him, given that he was just a 3rd round pick in rookie drafts. But maybe you can get it done with a 3rd and a low end player or something interesting along those lines. But I think they're worthwhile targets, particularly if you have Judkins, because it's such a question mark. You just don't know what's going to happen. And my recommendation on what to do if you have Judkins would simply be to hold. If you're selling him now, you're simply not going to get enough for what he will probably end up being worth, because once he does sign and get his suspension out of the way, as an early 2nd round pick, the expectation is that he should be a pretty good player, but you don't want to just sell him so low. You don't want to trade him for a 2nd round pick. If you can get a future 1st round pick, I think that's perfectly fine, because, hey, you're just kicking the can down the road an extra season or 2. I would actually be targeting a 2027 1st round pick. But again, if you want to just kick it down the road an extra year, pick up a 26 first, that's totally fine. But I'm not taking a lowball offer for Judkins because I think it's short-sighted. Certainly it is a crappy situation to be in right now, but you don't want to just lose out on what could be some really nice, production in the future because you panicked a little bit now. But that being said, going out and trying to acquire Dylan Sampson or Jerome Ford could be a very smart move. Again, the cost probably not going to be super high because most people recognize, hey, eventually this is going to be Judkins. It's just a matter of when, and that uncertainty certainly is not fun to deal with if you have Judkins on your roster. All right, so the wide receivers, Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver 38. He's player 100 overall. Cedric Tillman, the wide receiver 60 and 180 overall. Deontay Johnson, who signed with Cleveland this year, he's wide receiver 126. And then Jamari Thrash at wide receiver 145. So pretty rough room, to be honest, outside of Jerry Jeudy. And the tight ends, though, they're much better. David Njoku, tight end 12, 112 overall. And Harold Fanon Jr., tight end 23, 166 overall. So we'll talk about the pass catchers all together here. Jerry Jeudy, I think, is a very nice value in Dynasty. He's the clear number one receiver on this team. Joe Flacco is going to have to throw the ball a ton this fall. So you could see some nice volume from Jerry Jeudy, especially in PPR leagues. David Njoku, I think, is in line for a very nice season as well. I don't know that this offense is going to be able to support more than Jeudy and Njoku. So I'm pretty much out on everyone else. But those two, at least, I think are solid every week starters. And then Harold Fanon Jr., I think, is an interesting guy for the future that should see a little bit of playing time this year. But I'm not that interested in Cedric Tillman. I think he's a bit overpriced right now. He had a nice flash last year. But again, the offense is bad. The team is bad. I just don't expect there to be a lot of scoring opportunities. Deontay Johnson actually might eat into Cedric Tillman's targets a bit more than one would think. In fact, it wouldn't shock me if Deontay Johnson is the number 2 receiver on the team after Jeudy. And his value, that could make him a buy target. I think you can get him for a 4th-round pick just to see what's going on. I was pretty much out on him at the end of last season, as was pretty much everyone, because of the mess that happened across his multiple teams last year and his off-the-field antics, not wanting to play, that sort of thing. So not exactly a guy I'd want on my team from a real-life standpoint, but for fantasy, he's still a talented enough player. He's not past his prime yet, and so for a 4th-round pick on a team that's going to have to throw the ball a lot because they're losing, you could probably do worse things with a 4th-round pick. So that's pretty much all there is to say on the Cleveland Browns. All right, so now our final team in the division, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have gone the way of the veteran this year for the most part, and led by quarterback Aaron Rodgers, QB 37, 261 overall. Mason Rudolph backing him up along with Will Howard, and Rudolph is QB 55, whereas Howard is QB 36. I think that is backwards in my mind. There's this weird hype with Will Howard that he could possibly be the number 2 quarterback in Pittsburgh this year, or that he could become the starter next season for Pittsburgh, and I just don't see that at all. I think it is pretty crazy to have him ranked as the QB 36 right now. I would absolutely rather have Aaron Rodgers, who is ranked 1 spot behind him, even though the age gap, 20-year difference essentially. You're only getting 1 year out of Aaron Rodgers, but at least you know that you're getting 1 year as a starter, whereas Will Howard, I don't know that you ever get a season as a starter or let alone a handful of games as the starter. And so I'm just not interested for that price tag at QB 36. So if you have someone that is really buying into Will Howard as the future starter, I would go try to sell him off now before it becomes clear that that's probably not going to happen. Because the way this thing is going to play out, Pittsburgh, if they struggle, which very well could be the case, they're going to have a top 12 pick, something along those lines, and they're going to draft a QB. And then if they have a ton of success, they're probably going to end up signing a veteran quarterback to be the starter to try to continue that success. I just don't really see a world where they roll with Will Howard next year. I suppose in theory they win 9 games, they miss the playoffs, they're picking 16th, and then they're stuck in no man's land. But even then, it's supposed to be a pretty good quarterback draft class. I would be stunned if it is not a rookie or some sort of veteran next year that is starting for Pittsburgh. I don't think it's going to be Will Howard. Now at running back, it's another kind of interesting situation here because you have the veteran Jaylen Warren joined by a rookie in Caleb Johnson. I'm a huge Caleb Johnson fan, checking in at running back 17 on Keep Tread Cut and number 70 overall. Jaylen Warren is running back 42 and 168 overall. Kenneth Gainwell, the third stringer, at running back 93. And then wide receivers. DK Metcalf is going to be the guy. Signs a big extension there after the trade. Comes in at wide receiver 25 and the 77th player overall. Robert Woods is there. Calvin Austin's there. Roman Wilson. There's really nobody else outside of DK Metcalf at wide receiver for Pittsburgh. Roman Wilson is the wide receiver 79. Calvin Austin, wide receiver 91. Robert Woods, who's currently listed as a starter on their depth chart, is not even in the top 500 given his age for Dynasty. So huge question mark for wide receiver 2 for Pittsburgh. I believe they reached out to Washington about Terry McLaurin to consider a possible trade. But it's going to be DK Metcalf that gets all the targets, and then the tight ends are probably going to get a lot as well. So Pat Freiermuth at tight end 26 and 172 overall, and then Jonnu Smith one spot ahead of him at tight end 25 and 171 overall. So I expect those two tight ends to be on the field a lot and get a lot of targets as well. This is a system that's going to be very run heavy. The tight ends are going to be involved. It's Arthur Smith calling the shots. So DK Metcalf, Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, the three guys that are probably leading this offense from a passing perspective. But I'm expecting Caleb Johnson to get some work as well. Jaylen Warren especially to get a lot of passing down work. It's probably going to be his kind of specialty on this team is the third down, 2-minute drill running back that can run routes, catch the ball. Caleb Johnson is really more of a power back, more of an early down grinder, but I think he has better hands than maybe would be indicated by his college receiving stat lines. So now I'm not expecting him to go out and be some just 3-down workhorse that catches 50 passes or anything like that. But I think he's going to give you very solid RB2 numbers as a rookie and will solidify himself as the running back starter moving forward for this team. So I think that it's going to be a struggle with this offense. I think that Aaron Rodgers is, clearly, a few tiers down from where he was with Green Bay. Of course, I think he's average at best, and he just lacks the mobility given the recent injuries, and the Achilles was a problem, and I just don't think that he's got much left in the tank. To be honest, I think that we are seeing what should be the final year of his career, and the Steelers are going to just hope that they can sneak into the playoffs with him leading the way. But I'm just not sure that they're going to be able to do it with this, collection of pieces on offense. Outside of Caleb Johnson, it's a rough running back situation. Outside of DK Metcalf, it's a very rough wide receiver, room there. So not a lot of weapons. Everybody, I think, is going to struggle a little bit. And it's going to be, Pittsburgh is going to be very sort of reminiscent of kind of your classic AFC North team where it's, good defense, bad offense, low scoring games, really physical, all that kind of stuff. I just don't see that translating to a lot of success this year, especially when you have teams like Cincinnati and Baltimore in the division that, regardless of how their defenses perform, are going to be able to score on just about anyone. And so I just don't think that Pittsburgh is going to be able to keep up with those teams. I think that it's going to be much more similar to what you see from Cleveland out of the Steelers this year. All right, so now that we've made it through all four teams in the division, let's go with our buy, sell, sleeper, and breakout for the division as a whole. And let's start with the buys. So I actually have two names. And first is going to be Mark Andrews. I mentioned that at tight end 13, I think he's a really solid value right now, given that he's priced behind Isaiah Likely, even with the injury that Likely suffered. I tend to stay away from players who get injured in August, especially when it's, particularly when it's something like a hamstring or some other muscle strain. Now, this case, I think it's something a little bit different. I believe it's a knee issue for Isaiah Likely or a foot. But again, knees, feet, hamstrings, any type of leg injury gives me some, room for concern at this point in the season, because those players start behind. They got to catch up. There's a high risk of re-injury. And so Mark Andrews, I think for 2025 is going to be great. And he is a buy for me at this point. And then the other name is Chase Brown. So at running back 11, I think that it's a very fair price, but also I think that there is a ceiling for him that is higher than running back 11. I think that he could be a top 6 running back this year, and or at least give you a very, very good RB1 season, even if he is in that 6 to 12 range. Again, high-powered offense, lots of scoring opportunities. He can catch the ball. And so I have high hopes for Chase Brown, and I have him as a buy right now. Now, my sell is going to be Cedric Tillman. So I mentioned I wasn't super thrilled with him, especially for the price. He's valued a little bit higher than Rashad Bateman, and I would rather have Rashad Bateman straight up than Cedric Tillman. And I don't believe in the offense. I worry about the quarterback situation. I am a little bit worried about Tillman's injury history from last year, and the fact that again, a lack of success on offense is going to limit scoring opportunities. The one route to success for Cedric Tillman, I think, is, aside from injury issues for teammates, would be Joe Flacco is the quarterback, and they just decide to air the ball out every game. And there's, Flacco's throwing the ball 40, 45 times. And then in that scenario, someone's going to catch some passes, and Cedric Tillman will probably be a decent flex-worthy player. But if it's more of a standard offense or anything along those lines, he's going to be at best the third target in the offense behind Jeudy and Njoku. And it would not shock me if Deontay Johnson is a step ahead in the pecking order, or the running back situation, whether it be Jerome Ford or Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson, whoever it ends up being. It's going to be a tough road for Cedric Tillman. All right. Now, my sleeper for the division is going to be Dylan Sampson. So Jerome Ford would fit into this category as well, and if you want to put him in this category too, I have no problem with that, because I think one of them is going to have some nice, sneaky fantasy value, especially in the first half of the season. And so I'm going to go with the rookie, Dylan Sampson. I think that he has a little bit more juice than Jerome Ford. He's going to cost you more, of course, being the rookie, the younger player. So if you want to take a shot on a lower cost sleeper, then go for Jerome Ford. But Sampson, to me, could end up starting week 1. We don't know how things are going to shake out with Quinshon Judkins. And if he misses any significant period of time, whether it's due to being unsigned, whether it's because of a suspension, combination of both, then, Dylan Sampson to me is the guy that steps in as the RB1, with Jerome Ford working the passing down situation, or taking over that role, I should say, in the backfield. But Dylan Sampson could have some nice sleeper potential, and I just don't think he's being talked about a lot right now. I do think that Jerome Ford is actually being steamed up a little bit more because he is the veteran, and I think that makes sense. If Jerome Ford comes out and gets more touches, or he's the first guy on the field, I don't think that will surprise me at all. But again, that's why both players, I think, would qualify as sleepers, and the intrigue behind the rookie and Sampson to me is enough to put him a step ahead on my list. And my breakout pick for the division, not a ton of great options, to be honest. I think there's a lot of people that you kind of know what you're getting. So I'm going to go with Caleb Johnson, a rookie, as my breakout pick at running back. I think he's in line to be a very solid RB2, could threaten to be an RB1, and should be somebody that you can have as an RB2 in your lineup or a flex play on a weekly basis. And I think he'll get enough passing down work to have some solid PPR value. And I just really love the potential with the size and the fit in the offense, where they should run the ball a ton. All right, so my division predictions, I mentioned, relatively straightforward. I think Baltimore is going to win the division again. I think they're just too good all around. Lamar Jackson leading the way, and Derrick Henry was a huge boost to that team. So Baltimore number 1. I'm going to go with Cincinnati finishing in second. I love this offense, like I'm sure everyone does, especially for fantasy purposes. The defense is going to be terrible, and so for those reasons, I don't know if Cincinnati will make the playoffs, but I think they'll be right there pushing for a wild card spot at a minimum. and that Joe Burrow and co, if they have to score 40 or 50 points a game, I wouldn't put it past them to do it. I just very much question the front office decision-making when it comes to how they're handling their defense. But we'll see what shakes out. But I think that they can at least finish in second place in this division. And I'll go with Pittsburgh in third. Better than the Browns, but I don't have a lot of huge expectations for them. I think they're probably more of like a 7-10 type of team, 8-9. Mediocre. They're never going to be completely terrible with Mike Tomlin there. They have a good defense, but I just don't know that this team is anything better. Like, to me, it's a floor of like 6-11 and a ceiling of 10-7. Like, they're going to be somewhere in that 6-10 win range, and I think the very safe bet would be a 7 or 8 win season for them. I'm not buying the hype. I don't believe in Aaron Rodgers. And so a third place finish at a very mediocre, 7-10, 8-9, I think is probably what's in store for Pittsburgh. That leaves Cleveland in last. I don't think that should be as a surprise to anyone. I think the offense is going to be dreadful. I think the defense is solid, but clearly the worst team in this division, I think. They'll be headed for a top 5 pick, and will likely draft their quarterback of the future. So there you have it. There is my AFC North divisional preview. We went through all 4 teams, touched on buys, sells, sleepers, and breakouts. And we'll be back next week as we move on over to the AFC South, which is a pretty interesting division for fantasy purposes. So in the meantime, go download Fast Draft, use code WARROOM to get a deposit match up to $50, and go check that out. And tune back in next week for another show. So thank you very much for listening. My name is Andrew Valancourt, and you have been listening to the Dynasty War Room podcast.